Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
It is 7:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, Stuart Varney from Fox Business Channel joins us to talk about the fiscal cliff negotiations. Also at 8:05, we are going to open the lines wide open for the gun control conversation in light of the Newtown tragedy that we've been having all morning long. So stay with us and chime in. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Brian Wilson. Good morning, Brian.
You know, Larry, in 1987, I was a brand new young reporter in this town. I'd been on the job less than a year working over at Channel 5. WTTG, and my job was to cover Capitol Hill.
Was there a glimmer of hope in your eye?
No, if I only knew then what I know now. But as a young reporter, I remember very distinctly the day that President Reagan nominated a guy by the name of Robert Bork to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Oh. And by the way, the left was standing there loaded for bear. Within 30 minutes, Ted Kennedy took to the floor of the Senate and said, Robert Bork's America is a land in which women would be forced into back-alley abortions, blacks would sit at segregated lunch counters, rogue police could break down citizens' doors in midnight raids, school children could not be taught about evolution, and writers and artists could be censored at the whim of the government, and the doors of the federal courts would be shut on the fingers of millions of citizens. And from there, it got worse.
Yeah.
The Attorney General at that time was a guy by the name of Ed Meese, who had sort of a seat in the arena as this was all taking place. He's on the phone with us now. Mr. Attorney General, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Good to be talking with you, gentlemen.
You remember those days, I know very distinctly. What was going on inside the Reagan administration during all this time? And it really, wasn't this sort of a defining moment in the way Washington conducts its affairs?
Well, it really was. It was a despicable thing, the way in which Bob Bork, one of the greatest legal minds of our time, was savaged by left-wing politicians, including, unfortunately, Ted Kennedy and many others, although the piece that you just played kind of illustrates how desperate they were to try to defeat this great man.
Yeah, and the committee was headed up by, at that time, Senator Joe Biden, currently our vice president.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. General Meese, we've of course played the famous quote from Ted Kennedy or Brian read it, talking about Robert Bork's America. What's interesting to note is that Justice Kennedy ended up getting that seat. He's currently, of course, still on the bench. And Justice Kennedy seems to be that sort of crazy swing vote. You never know exactly where he's going to land on any specific issue. I wonder if, in retrospect, you can reflect back on the last 2 decades and think to yourself what America might have been like, what would Robert Bork's America really have been if it had been Justice Bork instead of Justice Kennedy?
Well, I think there's no question that Bob Bork, with every vote, but also with his tremendous intellectual capability, would have made a real case for constitutional fidelity, and I think we might well have had some differences in terms of some of the cases, at least.
All right, so he passed away yesterday. What were your thoughts?
Well, my thought, I had the opportunity to talk with him and visit with him just a few weeks ago when he was pretty weak, but he was still cognizant of everything going on and adding to the conversation. And it was, of course, with great sadness that we see his passing, but also I think the memory that he leaves us of intellectual integrity, of scholarly excellence, and of leadership in the field of law is a memory that all of us will carry with us for a long time.
You know, I want to go back to this idea that whole confirmation battle, which was an immensely ugly affair. And you're right to point out, Larry O'Connor, that the person in charge of the Senate Judiciary Committee at that time is our current Vice President of the United States. But it sort of set the tone for future confirmation battles. I mean, up till then, there was a lot of deference given to a president's nominee. And then it changed, and these confirmation battles became incredibly ugly and brutal affairs, and it really coarsened the nature of political discourse in this town.
Yes, it certainly did, and, what happened was there had been some contentious nominations before by either party, but this was the first time you had a full-fledged political attack, even to the point of television ads in the home states of some of the senators on the committee.
Attorney General Meese, I wonder if, right now we're having a pretty hot debate in the wake of the tragic events in Newtown, Connecticut, and I wonder certainly what Justice Bork would say in response to some of the things that have been said about the Second Amendment, and also your thoughts, because a lot of this came up when you were the Attorney General.
Yes, I think it's very sad that we've seen too many politicians trying to utilize this tragic incident as a means of putting forth their ideas of what ought to happen. And unfortunately, as I know you've already had people on your program, experts like John Lott and others, there is no magic bullet, so to speak, that will solve this problem. And I would hope that those who are looking at the problems of the mentally ill and how we treat them receive at least equal attention to those who are trying to do something about guns.
What do you think the solution is?
Well, I think obviously this is a difficult problem. There is evil in the world, and we're not going to solve that particular problem. I think that trying to do away with guns, for example, or even so-called assault weapons, many of which are lower caliber weapons than normal pistols, that sort of thing, I think we're barking up the wrong tree. It's interesting to note that some of the states and jurisdictions that have the strictest gun laws have the most killings in this country. And so I think trying to add more laws to the laws already on the books, and there are plenty of them dealing with firearms, is probably not the right track. On the other hand, we certainly should be enforcing the laws that are on the books, and there's some indication that that's slacked off in recent years.
Former Attorney General Ed Meese is our guest, and I find it fascinating that there are calls from liberals, from Democrats, calling for really looking at what's going on in Hollywood with regard to violence on film and also violence in video games, and no one from the left is really screaming about the First Amendment. I remember, of course, your famous Meese Commission on pornography. That you were attacked as going after the First Amendment and freedom of expression. Do you find it ironic that you were attacked on First Amendment grounds, and yet with violence it's not as big an issue if it's coming from the left?
Well, it is. Our commission found the connection between organized crime and the pornography industry, the harm that it does, and other things like that, which really made a contribution to the country, and yet we were attacked by some people trying to claim that the First Amendment was in danger, and obviously that was not at all the case at that time, nor should it be today.
All right. Well, Attorney General Ed Meese, it's good to have you. Thinking Ted Kennedy, I'm sorry.
Yeah, make sure you bring Jed and Ted next time, because we'd love all three Meeses.
Yeah, all
here.
three of the Meeses can come. Attorney General Ed Meese, thank you so much for joining us. You've been a good friend of this program. We appreciate you being with us.